Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me today for day 6 of the Light Wellness Experience Workshop. As you know, my name is Regina Lossell. I am the CEO of the Light Vitality Group. We are a collaborative platform for light wellness support, bridging the gap between industry representatives of the light wellness market, interdisciplinary, whether that be lighting practitioners and designers, lighting manufacturers, technology integrators and programmers, electrical contractors, maybe architects, interior designers, and lighting designers, right? And community members, our end users, you, individuals, just like any professional, we are human beings first and foremost, and we all have circadian rhythms. We all live our lives under light, and so it becomes imperative for us to understand this very personal but critical layer of personal caretaking, of maintaining circadian health through aligning our circadian rhythms to its primary active agent and facilitating agent, very specific spectral content of natural daylight. And so what we do as an organization is we educate on that. So if you've been with us for the last 5 days and joining us today as well, then you understand what circadian rhythms are better at this point, what light's role is in supporting circadian health. You may understand better some applications on how to attain better sleep and, to help regulate our circadian rhythms and circadian health, right, with specific types of strategic lighting strategies. So I would love to hear from you. Give us a shout out, drop a hell yeah in the comments if you've been enjoying this workshop, if you find it useful. I'd love to hear how you're applying your light wellness guidelines, right? Remember, we have our workbook that we've been using for the first 4 days of the workshop. And on page 2, we have guidelines on how to attain a lifestyle of light wellness with daylight and natural lighting sources. And if you are finding it difficult to achieve a quality, healthy lifestyle under light using just daylighting solutions, then reach out. Let us know, whether in the comments, in a private message, schedule a consultation, and we'll figure out how to get an electric lighting strategy integrated into your life that may work better for you as well. With that said, that means that we're not just talking about natural sources, we're talking about electric sources, and we're talking about mindfulness, right? We talked about that conscious understanding of how to move throughout light, throughout life, indoors and out, under electric lighting solutions and natural lighting solutions, and being mindful of what that means for you and your behavior and your lifestyle needs. And so we're taking a very holistic approach to wellness in this regard. And so today's discussion is all about light wellness for holistic practitioners, holistic and integrative medicine practitioners, right? And there are some differences between the two. And so, again, we don't have pages inside the workbook for these breakout discussions applied very specifically to different market types, but we will be posting support material and resource material for you inside the group. I'll also be updating the lightvitalitygroup.com website with some of these materials to better support you as well. So you can always check back there, let's say next week, once I have a little bit more time to get it up and running after we wrap up this workshop. I like to kind of start out these holistic conversations with a statement that comes from the World Health Organization specifically. They say health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, right? And not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. That is a huge statement to make, because we all think about health and well-being and traditional medicine, and especially now we're starting to realize that mental health is just as critical as physical health, and that social health is something that we require in order to have emotional health and thus mental health, right? It's all cyclical. It all has a rhythm, much like our body's physiology has a rhythm, right? Everything impacts and informs the other. there. And so, with that said, let's talk a little bit about the differences in these types of naturalistic medicines, right? Holistic versus integrative. Um, Allopathic medicine was more of a treatment of symptoms with medicines unlike or dissimilar from illness, right? And we're talking about things like antibiotics and biomedicine and all of that thus became pharmaceuticals and what we recognize now as traditional medicine. We then kind of bridged into, well, actually, then we actually had a whole host of medicinal therapies called homeopathic therapies, right? Where we treated symptoms with medicines like or similar to the illness, right? So that comes with the premise of the law of similars, where it states like cures like. Right. We can kind of think about this in context of vaccines, different area, but it kind of gives you an idea, right? So we say if we administer the same substance in minute quantities, then the body over time will eventually be able to cure a disease inside a person. That's the premise of more homeopathic remedies. Now, when we look at the two, we can use both of them as complementary medicines, right? Or integral and integrative medicines. When we combine these alternative medicines with traditional medicines, right? And alternative is just another kind of word. It's a form, right? Homeopathy, herbalism, traditional Chinese medicine. These are forms of alternative medicine. So integrative medicine is when we can take alternative medicines and complement them with the traditional medicines that we typically recognize. But how does that differ more specifically from holistic medicine? In holistic medicine, we're not just looking at symptoms or diseases or, the parts of the whole. In holistic medicine, you're looking at the whole, right? You're looking at the whole person. You're treating the human being as a whole. You're looking at, a philosophy, right? It's a philosophy that believes in treating the whole person, with the integration of the mind, the body, the spirit, rather than just looking at, the parts and pieces that make them up, right? We're looking at, maybe a specific organ system or a nervous system or maybe just, a central nervous system versus enteric nervous system. You're looking at the whole person and how that person's life, how that person's soul, how their being really impacts how their health and wellness manifests, right? And so when we do this, there are a few ways that holistic practitioners tend to look at creating a healthy lifestyle without sacrificing a daily routine. And one of them, we're going to go through a list of them, and I'm going to talk about how light wellness applies to kind of each of these principles. So if you are a holistic practitioner or an integrative medicine practitioner who is leaning on or utilizing holistic therapies and holistic practices and principles, then these are some ways to apply light wellness principles, applications into your existing practice, and to support your practice that much further, right? So again, just like we discussed in yesterday's session, that there are a couple of things that you're going to need to have on hand if you decide to incorporate light wellness into your practice. Now, as we've heard from Nicole Sonderman, registered and board certified sleep clinician over the last 2 days, that light is something that is used inside traditional medicines, right? But it's there's very little understood about why it's being used, right? Florence Henderson, she understood way back when that you needed light, that patients did better when they faced Eastern light and when they were sun soaking, during and between treatments. Of course, at the time, we were still identifying wavelengths and UV. And so, there was this kind of mixed message that, oh, maybe light helps, but also light is dangerous. Now we've been able to break apart and identify which spectral properties of light are dangerous, which spectral properties are supportive, which spectral properties can be either in small doses, right? And so, and what those units of measurement are. And that's what this workshop is trying to help convey, is that if you are a holistic practitioner, it is highly likely that you are already incorporating and promoting the use of natural daylight and getting outside and staying active and energized underneath natural daylight as a part of your practice. We want to help you take that part of your practice one step further. We want to help you level up. And so that's what this is about. So one of the things that a couple of the things you're going to need to have on hand, of course, and we can provide that for you. I would love to work with you to help you enhance this layer of your practice are, right, quick, sleep wake evaluations, right? Because we know that lighting is very integral to the circadian biofunction of sleep health, and we know how important sleep is to overall health and well-being and restorative and regenerative processes, both inside and out externally, right, our skin. And so, you want to have some sort of survey on hand or questionnaire on hand to be able to assess the quality of your patients and your clients' sleep hygiene. And again, the resources we provide come from questions just from within the National Sleep Foundation. These questions are used inside the sleeping clinics that identify and diagnose circadian rhythm disorders and sleeping disorders. So if you are interested in attaining this list and using this list inside your practice, I would be happy to provide that for you. Another area of education you're going to need to provide inside your practice, particularly to light wellness and circadian health, is patient or client education and guidelines, right? Now you have the guidelines from the workshop. So that's, kind of your freebie, right? So you can take those guidelines and you can use them and run with them, but you also need to be able to educate and provide information about why. So, use the workbook that you have as a reference when you're building this layer. And then if at any point you feel you need that added support, reach out and we'd love to support you. You want to provide caregiver education, right? Some of your patients or your clients may not be the actual, or some of your clients may not be the actual patient, but the caregiver of a patient, or your patient might have a support network that they feel would benefit from understanding why they're doing what they're doing inside your practice. And so having that education and guidelines available for them as well can be so supportive to your conversation and to the success of the practice that you're providing. Bulleted benefits, right? So we're going to need bulleted benefits of your, of light wellness and circadian health, aligning circadian health specifically. I apologize if I may have just blipped out for a second. My computer, for some reason, shut down for like a split second. So let me just double check and make sure that I'm up and running properly. I am. Okay, great. So let's walk through some of these ways that are recommended for living a holistic lifestyle without sacrificing your daily routine. Practice mindfulness, number one. If anything, that is number one inside this entire workshop, right? This is a very holistic approach to health and well-being. Practice mindfulness. Be mindful of what kind of lighting you're receiving during the day, of what kind of lighting you're receiving at night, 2 to 3 hours before you try to fall asleep, right? Be mindful of what type of lighting you're getting. Is it electric or is it natural? Be mindful of where you're oriented in your space. In the mornings, are you facing east or south, or are you facing west and north? And what does that mean based on the hemisphere that you live in, and based on, the position of your home and where your windows and all of your access to daylight is from an indoor setting. Right? Practice mindfulness, recognize. And so number two, that kind of ties into point number two, recognize and respect the powers of your body, right? Understand how to observe what is really going on, right? That feeling you get when you eat something really healthy versus something really not healthy, right? That feeling you get a few hours or a couple days after you've had a really rigorous, physical exercise, workout versus staying sedentary for an entire day or a few days at a time or weeks at a time, right? It's so easy to fall into those sedentary patterns and what that does to your body. We're all guilty of it. I've been guilty of it. I'm trying to break out of that cycle right now. I have to sit here and talk all the time, right? And it's so much easier to just want to relax. But be mindful of what your body is trying to tell you when these powers are at force within you, right? Be mindful and respect and recognize when your mind might be playing tricks on you, when you're spiraling into panic attacks versus, being able to calm down and balance that kind of emotional and mental state, right? How can we do that? What are some ways that we can do that? Well, that leads into point number 3. Eat clean foods, right? I mentioned a story recently. I believe it was on either day 2. I think it was day 2, not day 3. I suffered significantly for almost 20 years with symptoms of autoimmune disorders. And it was because of a virus I had contracted from my sister, when I central nervous system and my immune system didn't know what to do with itself. And this virus particularly fed on negative hormones and toxins. So when I was eating lots of junk food or, not eating clean foods, right, in general, when I was not practicing, meditation and relaxation and exercising and finding my center and finding my peace, right, and I had negative hormones like adrenaline and cortisol and epinephrine, right, all of these things inside of me that this virus was feeding on. So it was jumping from area to area, wherever I had the highest concentration. Once I started practicing meditation, once I started aligning my circadian rhythm so my immune system had a better means to be able to fight, right? That was recognize and respect the powers of my body. I recognized that my immune system was not able to fend for itself. I recognized that the foods that I was eating and the mental health that I was manifesting was actually creating more negative effects on my life and was literally feeding this virus, right? And I had to stop it. Right. So I cleaned up my foods. I started eating organic. I literally started cleaning my produce better. And I started getting morning daylight. And within a month, so many, if not all, of those symptoms of autoimmune disorders dissipated. And to this day, I still do not have, nor do I worry anymore about if they're going to show up, when they're going to show up, or that they do show up at all. And that doesn't just mean mindfulness and worrying about your own health. It means mindfulness and worrying about how your health is going to impact your interpersonal relationships, right? And that creates a whole host of issues in and of itself, right? They always say, no one invite the Debbie Downer, right? Or, oh, there's, negative, you try to remove toxic people and toxic energy from your life. You don't want to be one of those toxic people, right? But you also want to be mindful of who is positive versus toxic in your life and what that means and how that impacts who you are and how you live your life from a holistic standpoint. So number 4, focus on positive relationships. Right? And positivity doesn't always just come from one person. It's relationships are a two-way street. It's a two-way interaction. So you have to be mindful and respect and recognize the powers within you, whether they are good or bad, and how they are impacting your relationships with the powers of another. Right? Whether those are good or bad, and identify how to be able to kind of build and recycle positive energy so that you are able to have that positive interpersonal relationship and connection, and you don't wind up alone. And in that way, when you're able to recognize those elements and you're able to, manifest and hold on to these positive relationships, you can let yourself grow. Right. And growth is such a huge aspect of the body, the mind, and the spirit. And particularly when it comes to light wellness and circadian health, right? Growth is such a critical conversation. I've said it before, I will say it again, and I will never stop reiterating it. I love the conversation around the human growth hormone, right? It's not, just body, or it's not just spirit. It is mind and body, right? It is your body's physiological ability to be able to produce a hormone that helps your body grow, that helps repair muscles, helps repair skin lesions, helps allocate all of the nutrients and the electrolytes that you eat from all of the clean food that you're now ingesting, right? And to be able to restore the energy within you. And when you're able to do that, you feel stronger, you feel healthier, you feel better, and that impacts your mental and emotional state in such huge ways that so many people take for granted, and thus could potentially impact positive personal relationships. So again, when you pay attention to these small nuances of light wellness and how they impact your life and their well-being, and thus now can impact the life and the well-being of your patients, of your clients, right? Of the people whose lives you're trying to support and the people whose lives depend on you most, right? If you are a parent, if you are a caregiver, if you are a medical practitioner in some way, there are plenty of people who depend on you, right? And to know this and have this, caretaking method in your wellness and caretaking toolbox is such a powerful tool to help yourself, to help the people who depend on you, and to kind of keep educating the world about this, right? Because we don't want to keep falling into cycles with allopathic and traditional medicine. We want integrative medicine. We want holistic medicine to become a part of the conversation. We want to connect with people and help people become aware, right? But, and this brings me to a really interesting point as we start to wrap up today's discussion, is that my son was born at 25 weeks premature. Now, I've mentioned that I myself had a personal, circadian health disruption and light wellness journey. But then about a year after I started Light Vitality Group, I found out I was going to be starting a family. You can hear him in the background. He's whining for me right now. So we got a few more minutes before he starts banging, which is the most beautiful sound at this point, because you're about to hear this crazy story. So about a year into starting Light Vitality Group, everything was going great. All of a sudden, I found out that I was going to be starting a family, and I was not supposed to be able to start a family. So it was a huge surprise. And I knew that if I ever did have a child, that it would be a very complicated pregnancy. The chances of survival would be slim to none. And so I was very much mentally prepared for the journey. Over the course of my pregnancy, for the little time that I was able to carry him, I, was able to prepare emotionally for that journey. About 3 weeks, and he was born, as I said, 25 weeks premature. So about 6 months, he had 3 months plus left in the NICU until his due date, 15 weeks. So actually more like 4 months left in the NICU before his due date. And we wound up in the NICU for 7 months. And about 3 months into our NICU journey, his dependency on oxygen he was dependent on oxygen, and his oxygen equipment, where he was being kept in a southern facing window on the 8th floor, almost floor to ceiling windows. Within 6 feet of those windows, lots and lots of natural light. He had a 0 to 5% chance of survival, and he was kicking butt and taking names and growing in ways days that literally had teams and teams of specialists just scratching their head, right? Traditional doctors and specialists being like, this should have worked or this shouldn't have worked. And I don't know how he's thriving and why he's doing so well because he's not following any clinical norms for treatment that we've been providing. Like this was very uncharted territory for everyone. And when I say I watched teams of doctors stand around and scratch their head, I mean, I literally watched them stand around and scratch their head. It was like watching a cartoon, right? About 3 months in, his equipment failed. He had to be very quickly and suddenly relocated to an area of the hospital that had that was open and he could be hooked back up to his oxygen. And that area was in the core of the building without any access to natural daylight. And being a lighting designer and having a company around developing light wellness solutions and educating on light wellness and circadian health, of course, I brought my light equipment, my spectral equipment, and my light meters in, and I started taking measurements of the hospital and the NICU and looking at the differences in the kind of light he was getting versus, before he was moved to the new type of light he was getting. And within less than 2 weeks, 6 major biofunctions of circadian health began to fail one by one, right? That domino effect, how we said sleep impacts heart and heart impacts immune system and gut health and sleep impacts gut health and physical response as well as heart and physical response, right? So all of these biofunctions of circadian health started to fail one by one. He wasn't sleeping, he wasn't digesting, he was throwing up constantly because he wasn't able to digest, so he was getting too full. He wasn't producing bowel movements. He started having severe allergic reactions. He started having regular heart arrhythmias. His oxygen, saturations were all over the board rather than stabilized. He had a very, very depleted level of human growth hormone in his system, as most premature babies do. Ding, ding, ding. No surprise there at this point. And so after about 3 weeks of watching this and talking to each of his doctors one-on-one, each of his specialists, at the time he had 12 specialists. So I talked to each specialist and their team of support, one by one to figure out what they thought was going on, what their, plan of action was. And I very quickly realized that there was a lack of communication between the teams and a lack of understanding of this holistic look and holistic approach to his caretaking. And so we called a team meeting with all 12 specialists and their support team. So there was a room of just over 30 people inside this discussion. And, I went through with them one by one and had them explain what was explained to me individually, one-on-one, so that we collectively as a team could discuss it and look at it as a holistic and integrative approach. And inside that meeting, we were able to clinically identify all 6 major biofunctions of circadian health being compromised. And so that gave us enough reason and me the right as a parent to have him immediately relocated from the core of the building with only electric light that had very, very poor, daytime wakeful or evening sedative supportive profiles because it was one static light. And we relocated him to a day-lit area. He was within 15 to 20 feet of the window. And he, within within about 1 to 2 weeks, again, pulled a 180. He started digesting, he started sleeping, he was having bowel movements, his allergies started to clear up, he was able to eat again, he stopped having heart arrhythmias, his oxygen saturation stabilized, he grew and he grew and he grew to the point that 2 weeks later, one of his nurses who we had regularly walked in and was like, "Oh my gosh, is this your son? Like, this is not the same baby. He's huge." And I will post a picture showing the difference between, that 2-week period. Well, it's actually showing a 4-week period. But at that point, it was 2 weeks when we had discussed it, because I I didn't even realize. I knew he looked bigger, but I didn't realize how much he had grown. And I know in my heart, and I know from scientific research and from the applications and looking at the light readings and creating those observation reports for them, that light had everything to do with it. Because the only thing we changed between that 4-week period from location A to location B to location C was his lighting. Everything else stayed the same. His feeding regimen stayed the same. His medicines, his pharmaceutical medicine stayed the same. Of course, we had to adjust oxygen, here and there as needed. But other than that, everything else stayed the same, right? Except for the light. And so I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that light wellness is what saved his life. It is why we spent like $10,000 as a family to relocate from New York City to Central Florida, and to give him his body the best fighting chance, right? Physically, mentally, and emotionally, to thrive and grow and develop and recover. And he's kicking butt and taking names, right? He went from, up in New York, we struggled with being able to get him outside because of the winter and the cold, and because of air pollution and congestiveness of population. He would gain, let's say, anywhere from 2 to 4 pounds in a year. There were times when he would stay the same weight for 6 months, right? And maybe gain like a quarter of a pound here, within a 3-month period. We've been in Florida for 5 months now, and he's gaining a half a pound to a pound every single month when we go and we check in with our doctors, which I've never seen before. And I know it has so much to do with a healthy, light lifestyle. So if you take anything away from this, just understand that integrative medicine and its application of holistic and naturalistic therapies is such an incredible accomplishment for healthcare practitioners. And I hope that you, as a holistic practitioner or integrative medicine practitioner, take this to heart and really practice the mindfulness, right, of applying light wellness principles inside your practice, understanding it fully so that you're able to educate on it effectively. And if at any point you need to tap back in and understand what we're talking about, schedule a consultation with me, check out and revisit your workbook. And we host these workshops every 8 to 10 weeks for you to be able to revisit and relearn this information and flex that communication muscle, right? We're always talking about that. You want to flex, flex, flex. And the only way to really be able to communicate this effectively is to talk about it, is to flex that communication muscle, right? So find an accountability buddy, find someone inside your practice, someone outside of your practice, talk to strangers, talk to loved ones, talk to as many people as you can, and hold yourself accountable for being able to try to communicate this message. And it might not always be easy at first, but I promise the more and more you discuss it, the easier and the more fluid it's going to become, and the better you're going to get at it. And that's something that we want for you, for the world, for the people who depend on you, right? Because you're just going to see this discussion and this grow and grow and grow, because we understand now and we have enough evidence-based research in order to promote it more fully with more impact, right? And to keep pushing it out into society. And that's what these workshops are trying to do, to get us one step closer to having this widespread conversation about it. So you holistic and integrative practitioners, you are such a cornerstone to this conversation. I hope that you got a lot out of this workshop, particularly the discussion today. And just, know that we are here for you in any way possible to be able to help you integrate light wellness and circadian health conversation based on evidence-based research into your existing practice so that you can drive those points home that much better. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for the very last day of the Light Wellness Experience workshop, where we are going to be talking about light wellness for small businesses. So practitioners, right? Holistic, integrative practitioners, physical and occupational therapy. You might be all of the above, right? You might fall into each of these different categories and you might have your own small business. And if you do, tomorrow will be a wonderful session to identify financial indicators versus, value of health indicators for a return on investment versus a value of investment for your company, for your revenue, for your employee health, for their productivity. I hope you join us tomorrow. And thank you so much for joining me today. And as always, please remember to live lighthearted.